So thank you very much, dear colleagues. A large part of the next presentations will be dedicated to the Histogenes project, launched in 2020, which is a huge international collaboration of geneticists, archaeologists, anthropologists, historians, and isotope researchers. We are conducting archaeogenomic analysis of entire burial communities from 400 to 900 AD, which provides deep insights into the complexity of societies in early medieval East Central Europe. As an introduction, I will show you a summary slide on biological relatedness based on data from 7 cemeteries within the Histogenes project, among many other sites. It presents the proportion of pedigree members, that is, closely related individuals and distantly related individuals and unrelated individuals at each site. This indicates that the importance of biological kinship varied across periods, with a clear increase in its role during the 7th and 8th centuries compared to the 5th and 6th centuries. And not only does the proportion of related individuals increase, but the size of pedigrees grows as well. This phenomenon is clearly not only due to the length of cemetery use, but also reflects changes in social networks, marriage strategies, and cooperation between communities. From this broader pattern, we can conclude that during the Avar period, this is the 7th and 8th centuries, we are seeing large kin groups likely living in the same or nearby communities over multiple generations. In a recent paper published last year, we reported with my colleague Guido Nyakiruscone and many other co-authors 4 fully sampled Avar period cemeteries from Hungary, located in the central part of the Carpathian Basin on the Great Hungarian Plain. In my presentation today, I will first summarize the main findings of this study regarding kinship organization and marriage strategies, and then draw some conclusions about the role of children in society. Our genetic sampling, as you can see, proved to be extremely successful. In the picture, you can see the number of graves in each cemetery versus sample size. We obtained genome-wide data for more than 400 individuals, which allowed us to investigate social organization on a larger scale. The majority of the members of these burial communities could be arranged into smaller and bigger pedigrees, with the largest coherent pedigree containing almost 150 individuals through 9 generations. This slide shows the result of the biggest site investigated, which is the Rákóczi-Falva cemetery. And this is one further site with one big multi-generational pedigree from a cemetery with 64 graves. Here in this slide, I summarize our key conclusions based on these 4 sites. The populations were of diverse eastern origins, from the eastern steppe and very likely from the Pontic steppe region. And we found that they were organized in a fairly similar way. There was a strong patrilineal structure in these pedigrees, and we inferred female exogamy and patrilocality. Multiple reproductive partnerships and levirate unions were common. And we also found that exogamous females played an important role in connecting the various patrilines, both within and between sites. The absence of consanguinity indicates that this society maintained a detailed memory of ancestry over generations, and this could have been an important part of their identities, also for children. Now I will go over some of the data pieces that helped us reach these conclusions. The first aspect is the male-female and age-at-death ratios within pedigrees and among biologically unrelated individuals. These cemeteries include approximately an equal number of male and female individuals. What I'm showing you here is an example of the largest studied site again. However, the pedigrees include twice as many men as women. This male bias is even more significant when we compare sons and daughters. This is lineage males and lineage females in the pedigrees. As we discovered 102 sons and only 20 daughters, and most of the daughters are sub-adult individuals. We can compare these results with observations on a group of unrelated individuals who are not part of pedigrees. In fact, here again, there is a strong sex bias, but in other direction, because 51 individuals are female and only 13 are male, and most of these women are younger adults, while among related females, older adults are more frequent. The age distribution, position in the pedigree clusters in the cemetery, the chronology, burial customs, and grave goods suggest that the unrelated females were likely to be exogamous partners of lineage males who had not yet reproduced or whose children were not found at the site. So they are not detected as biologically related, but could still be part of the social unit. We can highlight these results from another aspect too. For women, youngest adult age group between 18 and 22 disappears completely from the lineages. And this is the age group which is represented already by young reproductive female partners. Based on all this, the following conclusions can be drawn about the lives of children and young individuals. Daughters appear in the pedigrees up to the ages of 16 to 19. The youngest mothers are between 18 and 22 years old, at least according to the pedigrees. This suggests that the transition between these age groups marks the time when young women likely move to live with their husband's family. This pattern is consistently observed across all the sites we studied, both large and small. However, exceptions are always particularly valuable for understanding social dynamics. To be honest, we have so far mostly focused on describing the dominant patterns. But in the future, we need to make a greater effort to pay closer attention to the outliers as well. For example, there was one case where a woman remained in her place of origin, and it turned out that she was the only one who, although from quite far away, was biologically related to her husband's family. Another conclusion is that we found no evidence of children being sent to other communities, for example, for learning or work, as was the case in some other parts of early medieval Europe. This is supported by the fact that none of the unrelated, the biologically unrelated individuals in the cemeteries are children. Today, I would also like to draw attention to another aspect, which is the types of reproductive partnerships. We found that both men and women often had multiple reproductive partners, a consistent pattern observed across both small and large burial communities. In the largest cemetery, shown again in the image, a total of 80 reproductive partnerships were identified, 47 of which involved individuals with more than one partner. Among these, we discovered 15 cases involving male individuals and 7 involving female individuals with multiple partners. Interestingly, we were able to trace these patterns across 8 generations, spanning the entire of our period. To explain this phenomenon, the relatively young age at death of some individuals may point to remarriage or serial monogamy, while the presence of older individuals in multiple partnerships may suggest polygyny. We found examples of both scenarios. In summary, multiple reproductive partnerships were not limited to elite individuals, as is documented in historical sources for the Avars, but were also present in the broader population. All of this implies that regarding children, a large number of siblings and half-siblings were raised together, predominantly in blended families. At the same time, in the case of new partners, we often found that they were not kind of strangers, but came from the same biological kin group. This is supported by multiple cases of levirate union found in 3 of the 4 investigated sites, that is, closely related male individuals having offspring with the same female partner. The custom of levirate is widespread, but it was particularly common in pastoral societies which are patrilocal, patrilineal, and observe female exogamy. It was not mentioned for the Avars, but there are contemporary written sources for several steppe peoples, which suggest that what we see in the pedigrees is probably formal levirate and not extramarital relationships. We can give a deeper social meaning for multiple partnership by looking at the archaeological context, burial customs of men and women and children, position of these graves in the cemeteries, and the type of the grave goods. In general, we find that biological relatedness was fundamental to the spatial organization of the cemetery. Regarding smaller kinship units, we see that reproductive partners and children are often buried next to or close to each other in the same burial cluster. In this presentation, we also compare our sites with a newly studied cemetery from the same region, which is the Tisabura site, which has not yet been published. This comparison illustrates how communities living in close proximity can differ significantly in terms of social organization. This topic will be explored further in the next presentation by Doris Pani-Kuchera on the cemeteries of the Vienna Basin. The population buried here had a European genetic background, so its ancestry is significantly different from the previously studied sites. And it stands apart not only in terms of ancestry, but also in terms of distant genetic relatedness, because there are only very few identity by descent or IBD connections between this site and the cemeteries presented before. These are the Tisabura pedigrees with one large pedigree and 6 smaller ones. The burial community has a high percentage of biologically related individuals, again, almost 80%, which is consistent with what we have observed in other of our period cemeteries. And here you can see a lot of numbers, the ratio of biologically related and unrelated individuals. It turned out that the male to female ratios in both related and unrelated groups differ significantly from what we observed at other sites. To summarize, there is no significant male bias among the biological related individuals at Tisabura, and the unrelated group also shows a more balanced sex ratio. There are further differences in reproductive strategies. At Tisabura, there are far fewer multiple partnerships, only men had multiple partners, and we found no cases of levirate unions. Consistent with these observations, we detected differences in the descent system and exogamy. These pedigrees include some maternal lineages too, unlike other groups characterized by exclusive patrilineality. And reproductive strategies are not limited to female exogamy. Men may also have originated from other communities. So we can say that biological kinship played a central role in the organization of society, including communities, households, and labor division in all cases. However, kinship structures and the roles of men, women, and children could still differ, even among nearby communities within the same region. In the final part of my presentation, I would like to briefly complement what I have said so far with some archaeological observations. One extremely important outcome of the large number of archaeogenetic studies is that we can now determine the genetic sex of children. By examining children's funerary representations, we are able to assign social meaning to biological findings. At the Rákóczi-Falva site, we found the following patterns. Among young female individuals, the appearance of grave goods begin around the age of 7 to 8, including belt buckles, beads, and earrings. A greater number of grave goods appear between the ages of 16 and 20, especially among lineage females, or in other words, daughters. Among subadult males, the pattern is more varied. No grave goods are present until around age 5 to 6. But a few exceptional cases appear from age 8 to 9, with young males buried with belt sets or horse harnesses. Gender-specific grave goods were generally uncommon among young children in the infants 1 category, with the first beads and earrings appearing only at 7-8 years of age. 2 infant male graves contained 1 or 2 beads, and 1 juvenile male grave contained an earring with a silver pendant. These represent all known cases of grave goods typically associated with the opposite sex found in subadult burials. This slide shows the average number of grave goods in female burials, highlighting the prominent role of the juvenile age group in funerary representation. The main limitation of our observations is the relatively low number of juvenile individuals, but similar patterns have been observed at other sites, which supports these findings. The most grave goods among female burials were found in these 2 juvenile female graves. They appear to have died just before entering into marriage and leaving the community. In addition, I found it interesting that both cases can actually be explained by further special circumstances. The first individual belongs to pedigree 2 from the 5th generation, dating to the so-called middle of our period, to the second half of the 7th century. This was a time of community change and the arrival of new groups according to archaeogenomic data, making it a competitive period for nearby settled communities. The other individual is from pedigree 4, which is the richest pedigree in terms of status objects. However, this young female, along with her brother and mother, was buried in a different part of the cemetery, far from other related pedigree members. Her brother's grave is the only child's burial at the site that included a belt set. And according to anthropological observations, she may have suffered from leprosy. So there are multiple reasons for a special treatment of these young individuals. Turning to male graves, we observe much greater differences in the value and prestige of men's grave goods compared to women's. In general, descent, age, birth order, and status as a founder within the pedigree, maybe within the community, were all closely correlated with individual status. Grave goods regarded as status symbols include belt sets, horses with horse harnesses, and especially in the later phase of the sites, from the mid-7th century onwards, we found evidence that the custom of burying a belt with the deceased was passed down from father to son in some pedigrees. The continuation of such customs within the lineage likely reflects to the inheritance of status as head of the family or head of the community. This might also be connected to the observation that although gender-specific grave goods are generally uncommon in the burials of male children, similarly to female burials, there are still 1 or 2 instances in each cemetery where a child is interred with a belt set. The youngest age at death is 8 to 9 years. Here are 2 examples from the cemetery of Kunszálás. And a further example from the smallest investigated site, which is Hajdunánás. So these boys are in all cases direct descendants of the founding males, which suggests that the decorated belts may represent a desired but unfulfilled status. At the same time, it can also be observed that the belts buried with young individuals were consistently simpler, with fewer and less elaborate fittings than those of adults. To summarize, even if the burial community does not fully correspond to the living community, it can be inferred that individuals grew up surrounded by an extensive network of biological kin. The social position of both girls and boys were shaped by gender, descent, age, and birth order. No biologically unrelated children were buried in any of the sites, suggesting children were not sent away from the original family. Children often lived in blended families due to the multiple partnerships and remarriage, and children from levirate unions remained integrated in patrilocal kin groups. The juvenile age group appears to hold particular significance among women, as most individuals buried with rich grave goods belong to this age category, representing young women who have died just before entering into marriage and leaving the community. Among boys, items such as belts or horse harness fittings appear only in exceptional cases, but already in the infants 2 age group around 8-9 years old, and only among direct descendants of the founding males, potentially reflecting aspects of inheritance, status transmission, or lineage representation. And of course, these findings later can be complemented with further data to better reflect aspects of lifestyle, especially through anthropological and isotopic evidence. And thank you very much.
Thank you very much.